Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. Purdue Pharma is settling with dozens of states, but do those most affected by the opioid crisis feel it's enough?
If there's evidence to show that they knew that these drugs were addictive and they chose to hide that evidence, then yes, I do believe that there should be some consequences for those actions.
A well-respected Hoosier statesman weighs in on the impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump. And you'll find one in dozens of small towns across the state, but no two Pizza Kings are quite the same.
And it's just something that you don't get everywhere, so it makes it special.
Those stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Hoosier statesman and former Democratic Congressman Lee Hamilton says Indiana representatives in Washington should do away with partisan labels when considering impeachment hearings for President Donald Trump. The 17-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives and vice chair of the 9/11 Commission didn't mince words when talking about President Trump's phone call with the president of Ukraine. And he says he doesn't think congressional leaders make an impeachment call lightly.
Removing a president from office, he's been elected by the people. Taking him out of office and say you can no longer serve, that's a very serious matter.
Hamilton says it's tough to compare the impeachment of Bill Clinton with the current situation.
The charges against Trump are not charges about his personal life, whether he told the truth on this matter or that matter, but they are charges against actions he took, calling the Ukrainian authorities, for example, that are in line with his official duties. And that's a huge difference in my view. If I were a member of the Congress, the House, I would vote to indict the president. If I were a member of the Senate, I would vote to convict him. That's my personal view.
Hamilton says many votes taken by members of Congress may not mean too much, but he emphasized representatives will remember how they voted on the issue. The maker of OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, has a deal to settle lawsuits with 24 states and thousands of cities and other plaintiffs. The suits allege the drug giant pressured doctors to prescribe an excessive amount of painkillers and misled doctors and patients about the overdose and addiction risks. Now, in the settlement, Purdue Pharma doesn't admit any wrongdoing, and the company has since filed for bankruptcy since agreeing to the settlement. Adam Pinsker explains why a lot of people affected by the deadly opioid epidemic are balking at the deal.
10 years ago, Greenwood resident John McCullough went to a doctor after suffering a back injury and was prescribed Percocet. Pretty soon, he was hooked on the pills.
I was essentially just taking handfuls of it at a time, and I had already lied to get it in the first place. I was faking my pain and my pain level, and it wasn't really hard to continue lying.
By the time his doctor cut him off from pain pills, it was too late. John was already addicted, so he started using heroin to get his fix.
It's the last thing I thought of when I went to bed, and it was the first thing I thought of when I got up in the morning.
That's how McCullough and thousands of other Hoosiers spiraled down the path of addiction, fueling the state's opioid crisis.
When pain treatment is successful, it stays successful.
For decades, Purdue Pharma encouraged doctors to prescribe an array of painkillers, marketing them as drugs to eliminate pain with no risk of addiction. Those marketing techniques became the foundation for a multi-state lawsuit against Purdue, claiming the pharmaceutical company is responsible for starting the opioid crisis. Earlier this month, Purdue agreed to a $10 billion settlement to end the lawsuits, but it's unclear how that money will benefit people and communities that are struggling. State Representative Matt Pierce is worried those dollars could suffer the same fate as the tobacco settlement money received during the 1990s.
That money came in and was supposed to be used for tobacco cessation programs, for prevention programs, and it was a little bit for a couple years, and then it started getting siphoned away every time you had a recession or money got a little tight.
At least 26 states have rejected the Purdue settlement, but Indiana is not one of those. Attorney General Curtis Hill says he supports the settlement, even though it's not clear how much money Indiana will get from it.
There's no amount of money that's going to compensate the loss of someone that you love. And that's a struggle. I lost my own son.
Director and founder of Overdose Lifeline, Justin Phillips, says Purdue Pharma and other pharmaceutical companies have changed the culture in which doctors and patients deal with pain, and it may be hard to change it back.
We made pain a vital sign, which means that you can measure pain the way you measure blood pressure. All of these things went into play, and the pharmaceutical companies led physicians to believe this pain medication is the solution.
Phillips says in addition to the lawsuits, more needs to be done to prevent the pharmaceutical industry from influencing doctors.
If there's evidence to show that they knew that these drugs were addictive and they chose to hide that evidence, then yes, I do believe that there should be some consequences for those actions.
McCullough lives a clean life now and holds down a full-time job as a plumber. But he says Purdue Pharma's settlement money isn't enough to make amends with victims like himself.
I'd be doing a lot better if the people that are responsible for all of this would be held accountable. And I think that the only way to do that is criminal charges.
In the last 20 years, more than 200,000 people have died from prescription drug overdoses. Another 200,000 have died from heroin or fentanyl overdoses. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Adam Pinsker.
While those lawsuits with drug makers play out in courts across the country, here in Indiana, healthcare workers, harm reduction experts, and government officials are working to get Hoosiers the help they need. As Tyler Lake reports, they came together in Bloomington this week as part of a summit meant to tackle the opioid crisis head-on.
Indiana's top drug treatment and enforcement official says the state is getting better at addressing the opioid crisis.
The number of overdose deaths in the state did decline last year, 12.9%. That's the provisional data from the CDC.
McClellan pointed to a bill that gives local communities the ability to establish a syringe exchange program without state approval as one example of success. State Representative Matt Pierce says getting fellow legislators to support harm reduction programs like syringe exchanges is crucial.
We really have to do a lot of work explaining to them, what is it like to suffer an addiction where you have both the drive to achieve the high and also the fear of going through withdrawal.
Chief Justice Loretta Rush says cooperating is the most effective way to protect communities suffering from the effects of opioid abuse.
Because we have to be involved with finding solutions because these people are before us on a daily basis. We see their lives being destroyed by addictions. We lock them up. Their children go into foster care, and we've got to find a way to deal with the problem and the disease.
Rush helped found the National Judicial Opioid Task Force, which provides courts across the U.S. with tools to help individuals successfully recover from opioid abuse rather than punishing them.
You can't just say, okay, we're going to lock everybody up. That's not working. So what treatments can we order? You can give a consequence to the behavior with regard to criminal behavior, but how do you deal with the disease of addiction?
Rush says that outside of family or friends, the court system is the #1 referral source to get people the treatment they need. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Tyler Lake.
Now for headlines, we go over to Barbara Brochures, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. Indiana Secretary of State Connie Lawson wants to reassure Hoosiers that their votes will be secure when they go to the polls. 2 states had their voter registration systems breached in 2016, putting states across the country on alert, including Indiana. Lawson says the state has invested in detection and prevention systems. Lawson previously said lawmakers didn't provide the funding levels she initially wanted. She pointed out that the state recently moved its voter registration data to a private server, something she says federal authorities told her will significantly help protect it. There's a new statewide campaign to raise awareness and change laws surrounding sexual assault against women in Indiana. 1 in 5 women in the state have reported being sexually assaulted. The new campaign will use cultural efforts, including reading and exhibits. An organizer says that's the point of a project called The Clothesline, which displays handwritten notes of victim stories.
The power of their individual stories will help lawmakers and all of us see that we need to address this issue head on, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.
The campaign aims to have more Hoosier women engage with lawmakers to strengthen laws. The group says more than 14% of high school-aged girls report being forced to have sex. Kruger says women in Indiana are often made to feel like an assault is their fault. The efforts to raise awareness will continue with numerous events around the issue planned throughout next year. A group plans to show up at the Bloomington Community Farmers Market tomorrow in support of controversial vendor Schooner Creek Farm. Owner Sarah Dye is an identitarian, and some have protested her presence at the market because of her white supremacist ties. Dye defended herself during a meeting of the Monroe County Grassroots Conservatives last night.
Chats have been taken out of context by radical far leftists, anarchists, and communists in order to fit their agenda, and my family has endured a summer-long smear of our goodwill and character in our community.
The Grassroots Conservatives group says they didn't want to draw attention to their speaker, so they moved the meeting to the library's Ellettsville branch. But a small group of protesters did show up. Dye says Schooner Creek Farm has been denied a permit to sell at the Bloomington Winter Farmers Market. She says her family has secured an Indianapolis attorney through donations and will consider legal action in the future. Vice President Mike Pence is pushing voters to contact their members of Congress about support for the proposed trade deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. He brought that message to Indianapolis this week.
Congress must approve the USMCA for it to take effect, and Vice President Pence's message is simple.
We have before the Congress what will be the largest trade deal in American history, and I came to Indiana to say it's time for Congress to pass the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement and pass it this year.
Pence touted the deal's purported impact for the country and the Hoosier state.
Nearly half of the exports from the state of Indiana go to Canada and Mexico. That's what makes this agreement so important, and it's really why I came home to talk about it.
And the VP made only an oblique reference to the elephant in the room, an impeachment inquiry launched by House Democrats this week.
Whatever they want to do in Congress to obstruct our agenda or roll out their latest accusations against the president or divide this country, President Donald Trump and I are never going to stop fighting for the policies and ideals that have made this country great again. That's my promise to everyone in Indiana.
Indiana's congressional delegation is split along party lines on the impeachment inquiry.
A new report examines possible ways to end the HIV epidemic, and one Indiana county is included in the national analysis. In 2015, Scott County experienced an HIV outbreak fueled by the injection of opioids. Since then, the county has been able to reduce the number of new cases. The Bipartisan Policy Center put out the Ending HIV in America report. Experts say Scott County made progress through a coordinated response. Indiana's expansion of Medicaid was also highlighted as a policy that helped address the outbreak. More than 12,500 people in Indiana are living with HIV. The Indiana Department of Transportation is developing plans for how to deal with erosion on Interstate 69 just south of Bloomington. A large amount of land is sliding down a hill mile marker 111 near the Lodge Road overpass. INDOT officials say hillslides are not uncommon in southern Indiana, thanks to the area's large amount of karst and water. They say fixing the hill is a priority project, and requests for contract proposals should be coming in soon. Erosion has been a problem along that stretch of I-69 between Bloomington and Crane several times since the interstate was completed. A new lawsuit challenging Indiana's work requirements for the state's Medicaid expansion program, HIP, is underway. Indiana's Gateway to Work program launched at the beginning of this year, and people had to start reporting work, school, or volunteer hours in July. Governor Eric Holcomb says the program ensures Hoosiers can easily skill up, volunteer in their community, or get a better paying job. HIP members will be required to report 80 hours a month by January 2020. The Vatican temporarily suspended a decree by the Indianapolis Archdiocese to no longer recognize Brebeuf Jesuit Preparatory School. In June, the Archdiocese made the decision because Brebeuf leaders refused to fire a same-sex teacher who was in a same-sex marriage. Officials announced this week the Vatican's Congregation for Catholic Education in Rome suspended the decree on an interim basis, pending its final response to the school's appeal. Indiana University officials say residence halls currently closed for renovations are on track to open next year. The university's partnered with off-campus apartments to provide housing to about 2,000 students displaced while it renovates the dorms. IU is trying to cut its original projections for several major dorm upgrades in half.
That plan initially probably had another 6 or 8 years to it. We have accelerated that plan to try to accomplish it within the next 3 or 4 years.
Last year, a group of students affected by the mold filed a lawsuit against the university regarding how IU handled the situation. IU wanted the lawsuit dismissed, but a Monroe County judge is allowing most of the legal challenge to proceed. That includes claims that the university knew about the presence of mold for years and acted negligently by downplaying health complications. And the Indiana Department of Natural Resources is offering free admission tomorrow to many state parks as part of National Public Lands Day, the largest single-day volunteer effort in the United States. The free admission includes state parks, state forests, state recreation areas, and fish and wildlife areas. And it's not limited to state parks. The newly incorporated Indiana Dunes National Park will host a cleanup from 9 to noon tomorrow. And what a beautiful day it's going to be for all those activities.
Yes, and we have some other news if you don't know already. Today is Barbara Brochures' last day at Wfiu, WTIU News. It's unfortunate for us. We're happy for you, though. You know what a great journalist she is because you get to see her every day. But what you don't know is you are an amazing person. You've been an amazing friend to me and everyone here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara.
It's bittersweet for me. It's a great team, and I'll be in Indiana still, so say hello if you see me.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk, one of our City Limits reporters sits down with us to talk about how fast the city of Bloomington is growing. And we look at a slice of Indiana life at restaurants you can find all over the state that have the same name despite no two being alike. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU Wfiu news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU Wfiu news team is where you are and telling your story.
$10,000. 15? 15, you think? 20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5. 24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000. 650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it. It's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Well, earlier this week, the Bloomington Plan Commission okayed the city's Unified Development Ordinance, sending it to the City Council. For this week's City Limits segment, we have reporter Mitch Legan on set to talk about some of the big questions residents have. Mitch, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I mean, that is one of the questions this week is how big is Bloomington getting? And you did a little research on it.
Yes. So back in 2000, about 69,000 people lived in the city. And over the course of the decade, about 1,000 people moved to the city. So that means in 2010, there were about 80,000 people living in Bloomington. And so this decade's almost over, and that growth rate has cut to about half. About 500 people have been moving to Bloomington. And so back in 2018, the closest numbers I could get, there were about 85,000 people living in Bloomington. But, and you know, that growth rate is slowing, but that's still a growth rate, and so the city is getting bigger. And Bloomington's Planning and Services Manager, Beth Rosenbarger, she says, you know, there's a reason for that.
Also, throughout history in the United States, the average household size has decreased. So neighborhoods, even with the same number of homes, used to be denser than they are now. So just over time, our neighborhoods used to hold more people than they currently do, just by the sheer fact that families have gotten smaller.
Okay, so we have just a little bit of time left. Are there other places that city planners are looking to put more housing?
Yeah, two main places. Currently the site of IU Health Bloomington Hospital, once that moves to the bypass, and the Sudbury Farm location on the southwest side of town. It's a little southeast of the Twin Lakes Park area. There's some undeveloped land there. And so there's not going to be enough housing there, so they got to push it to the neighborhoods.
All right.
Yeah.
Mitch, thank you very much. We have more online, of course, too.
Yes, as always, Joe.
Okay,
you know, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a pizza place just about every Hoosier has heard of, which is pretty remarkable considering many locations have no advertising budget. Pizza Kings dot the corners of small towns, and most haven't changed much over the years. As Barbara Brochures reports, that's what makes generations of Hoosiers loyal to them.
You might call Larry Commons a creature of habit.
I've been coming here my whole life.
He comes to this Pizza King in Evansville at least 3 times a week. And he always orders the same thing.
Stromboli, medium, well done.
We'd say his enthusiasm for the restaurant is unmatched, but there are a lot of Hoosiers who are passionate about this pizza place.
And it's just something that you don't get everywhere, so it makes it special.
This special brand of pizza got its start in Indiana in 1956. That's when Wendell Swartz and his brother opened the first restaurant in Lafayette. They developed the signature crust, sauce, and toppings Pizza King is still known for today.
The original commissary was at the corner of 52 and McCarty Lane here in Lafayette, Indiana. His brother then, after a year of business, decided that he wanted a different model. So what they did was they divided the state. Wendell took 3/4 of the state, and then his brother ended up getting roughly 1/4 of it.
Wendell's brother took the eastern portion of the state, the Pizza King's where you can ring the king and order pizza from a phone at your table. That company declined to do an interview for this story. The larger of the two Pizza Kings famously features a train in some of its restaurants.
You deliver the drinks to the kids in the booths with the train, and they open up the glass and they can get their drinks out of it.
Longtime employee Don Schutz bought the business from Wendell in 1966 and dramatically increased its reach. Now you'll find dozens of restaurants across the state, but no two are quite the same. Pizza King isn't a franchise, but has what's called a supply agreement.
We can't tell you how to run your business. The only thing you do is you buy core products from us. So then what'll happen is you're still your own boss, all right? And you get to use all the Pizza King memorabilia, the logos, catchphrases, and also the recognition of the Pizza King man. Everybody knows what it is.
Pizza Kings get their crust, tomato paste, cheese, and signature chopped sausage and pepperoni from the corporate commissary every week. But you'll find a lot of variations on how the pizza is prepared across the state. And what you'll find on the menu can vary too. Amore Pizza King in Rockville has changed locations and its looks over the years, but the recipes remained the same.
Cornmeal is one thing that we do for prep the doughs on. I just don't know that there's many out there doing it.
That familiar taste is what keeps so many people coming back year after year. Some even call wanting pizza shipped across the country.
Our friends who graduate and move away, the first thing they do when they come back to town is they come here.
It's the same back down in Evansville, where Strombolis are actually king. They account for about 70% of this restaurant's business.
We are probably starting to serve our
fourth generation Strombolis to people right now.
But Pizza King didn't become so beloved in Indiana because of the special ingredients or the consistency of the product. Hoosiers love Pizza King because it tastes like home.
Our son lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and when he comes in, first stop, they drive here.
If you started with your grandparents and then your parents had it and then you have it, and you go to Pizza King and you're feeding your son and daughter that, it hasn't ran its course.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brochures.
You'll only find one Pizza King outside of Indiana, just across the Illinois border. The owners have to drive to Indiana to get their ingredients every week. And today we say goodbye to our general manager, Perry Metz. His understanding of and passion for journalism makes him the news department's advocate and partner. For nearly 2 decades, Perry has been among our industry's more visible advocates for expanding in-depth news coverage. He's dedicated his career to local, regional, and state news, the safeguard of our democracy, and Perry's support has enabled our newsroom to grow and produce award-winning content. By every measurement of success in the public radio and TV world, our newsroom is at its peak, and we thank Perry and his visionary leadership for that. We wish Perry all the best in his next phase of life. And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. Alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.